This conversation begins with the subject, if walls could talk. Lord have mercy. If the four walls that surround you, if they could just talk and tell you all the things that's being said about you, if they could just talk about all the things you're saying about someone else. I mean, if walls could talk, all the secrets would be unveiled. What a world of trouble we'd all be in if walls could talk. Join me in the book of Joshua, chapter 6, verses 1 through 6. There's a conversation that's being had between Joshua and Moses. Moses is turning over, if you will, the torch to Joshua. Joshua's a young man, and he's come over with Moses, and he's been very loyal to Moses as a warrior. But Moses and the children of Israel, I like to call them the senior citizens, have forfeited their opportunity to enter the promised land. They have murmured, they have bickered, they have complained, and God has had enough of it. God allowed Moses to lead the children of Israel out of Egypt, across the wilderness, and then he allowed Moses to lead them across the Red Sea. As God had the waters to, I call it swipe left and swipe right, and the water stood up like walls. Now the Red Sea is 190 miles in width, and so that's a lot of walking. As a matter of fact, that would take about 2.6 days to walk across at 3 miles per hour. You're talking about 1 million Israelites in livestock. And so that wasn't just a simple door that was open to walk across. That was like an interstate. That was like the longest interstate you've ever seen, for miles and miles and miles long, of the Israelites walking across. So these walls were separated by miles upon miles so that they could come through. But then Moses led them through the wilderness. And keep this in mind, they had to fight in the wilderness. There were enemies in the wilderness. It wasn't just a easy walking or easy picking. No. They had to fight. And if you've ever been to Israel, and I have, you know that there are more rocks and pebbles and stones than anything. So when you talk about being in the wilderness, it's a place you want to be in and get out of as soon as you can. No one wants to reside there. But Israel complained. They murmured because they still had a Pharaoh complex. Some of you have a Pharaoh complex. Some of you haven't gotten over the Pharaoh in your life, which could be just you, yourself. There's a little bit of Pharaoh in all of us. Ask Adam and Eve. I think I told you last week, Adam and Eve were told by Satan that you could be as gods. That's that Pharaoh complex. And so they were disobedient because they thought maybe they could be like God. They listened to the voice of Satan versus the voice over God. I pray that you're not listening to any voice but God's voice. Go with me as we look at how the children of Israel forfeited their opportunity to enter into the promised land. As Joshua is leading the children, and I do mean children, babies, into the promised land. Each generation has their own culture, if you will. They have their own walls, if you will. And each generation brags on each generation, like the baby boomers brag on, like they ushered in soul music and disco music and R&B, and how they were the group who tried to assimilate, if you will. They tried to fit in. That was the baby boomers. And then you have the millennials coming right behind the baby boomers, and they ushered in hip hop and some R&B along with some pop, and they had a tolerance of all kinds. I mean, they just tolerate anything. And then you have the Gen Z, the Gen X, and the Gen Ys coming right behind them, and they definitely are ushering in and supporting hip hop and K-pop, if you will, and they're more open than any generation we've ever seen. They accept whatever comes. They're just so accepting. But they're more proactive as well. So you can see that there are walls about which generation is the best, and my generation did this, and we achieved this. And there's a lot of achievements within all these generations, but they all have walls up, celebrating themselves. Grandmama, granddaddy, them, if you will, they're all gone. I mean, listen to the story. They're all gone. As the children are being ushered into the promised land, the great saints of old will not go over. And so you're talking about babies going over to the promised land without this guidance and without all this wisdom going with them. So God made it very clear that since the senior citizen had this rebellious spirit, they wouldn't go over. He said all the children under 20 would enter the promised land. And so you're talking about 1 to 19. That's a lot of young people. But watch this. God allowed the Israelites, the seniors, to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. And so they stayed there with them. And so when you go back and do your numbers, if you look at it, if you were 19, by the time you go into the promised land, you're 59. And you got babies, of course, coming into the promised land. But you have a group of individuals that's coming into the promised land who never knew the Red Sea experience, if you will. They never knew the slavery experience. They never knew discrimination. They never knew racial tension. I mean, they didn't know all the stuff that their fathers and grandfathers knew. They didn't experience that. So they have no idea of what took place back then. They didn't have this Pharaoh experience. All they had was God and Moses and Joshua. That's the kind of experience they had. So there's a great disconnect between the old and the young. But Caleb and Joshua, the only two granted the opportunity to enter into the promised land, because they came back and they gave a favorable report. They made it very clear to Moses and all the other leaders that we can defeat the enemy in the promised land. But the rest of the seniors decided, no, we can't do that. We'd rather stay here in the wilderness. Look at this. We'd rather go back to Egypt. Now, you're right at the door. You're right at the entrance, and you want to turn back. Who does that? There's a song, it's too late to turn back now. I believe. I mean, it's too late. And they kept ticking God off. And that's why they forfeit their opportunity to enter into the promised land. I told you Joshua was taken over from Moses to lead the children because there's another wall that they have to face. There's another wall, a body of water called the Jordan River. And the Lord is going to open up that river as well, the same way he did the Red Sea. And there's going to be walls of water allowing the children to cross over. It just so happened they're not being chased by anybody except by themselves. So there's always walls that we're walking in between. You've got walls in your life, and we'll talk about those in a few minutes. But in the book of Joshua, chapter 1, verses 5 through 6, this is where we see the handoff, if you will, between Moses and Joshua. Verse 5 says, "There shall not any man be able to stand before thee all the days of thy life." This is God talking to Joshua. "As I was with Moses, so will I be with thee. I will not fail thee, nor forsake thee. Be strong and of a good courage." Now, I don't know about you, but if I had a wall up, if your sons or daughters have a wall up of not being confident, not being strong, or not being courageous, read this to them. This is a young man. As a matter of fact, this whole story is going to be about young people accomplishing their dreams, young people being successful, young people's moving with the Lord on their side, young people listening to the Lord. That's what this message is about. How sometimes the seniors have to get out the way. Sometimes the baby boomers got to move to the side. I mean, do your thing, but don't hinder the millennials. Don't hinder the Gen X, the Gen Ys, and the Gen Zs. It's our job to give them advice, but don't stand in their way. Don't pull them. Don't forfeit their dreams because yours didn't work out the way you wanted them to. So as we look at the children of Israel, they are being battle tested. The 40 years that God has the Israelites wandering in the wilderness, they are fighting their enemies, and so the children are with them. They're learning how to be strategic, how to be great planners. They're learning how to be great leaders. They're learning how not to complain and murmur. Yes, they're learning that as well. They're learning how to allow God to lead them. They're learning how to worship and to praise. They're learning where their blessings come from. See, they don't have the slavery mentality because they didn't grow up in slavery, most of them. So they don't know anything about slavery. And that's a beautiful thing. But what they do know is that their parents had to suffer. And they don't want to suffer like that if they don't have to. So they're ready to move forward. So the Lord opens up the Jordan River, similar as he did for the Red Sea opening, where God swiped left and he swiped right, and the waters formed a wall on both sides. They weren't being chased, I told you, by Egypt. They were only being chased by the ghosts of their fathers and mothers past. That's all they were being chased by. And this is what we pick up in the book of Joshua, chapter 6, verses 1 through 6. Now Jericho was straitly shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out and none came in. They got a wall. And the Lord said unto Joshua, See, I have given into thy hand Jericho, and the king thereof, and the mighty men of valor. Verse 3, And ye shall compass the city, all ye men of war, and go round about the city once. Thus shalt thou do 6 days. Verse 4, And 7 priests shall bear before the ark 7 trumpets of ram's horns. And the 7th day ye shall compass the city 7 times. And the priests shall blow with the trumpets. Verse 5, And it shall come to pass that when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when ye hear the sound of the trumpet, all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city shall fall down flat, and the people shall ascend up, every man straight before him. The walls that we all put up. How many walls do you have up in your family? Let's just start at home. I have 11 siblings. So that means there's possible 11 walls that's been placed up that I have to conquer, that I have to sift through whenever I'm speaking to one of my family members. That's 11 walls. Because I told you, we all have walls. You remember the Lord asked Satan, have you tried my servant Job? And Satan says, well, no. He didn't say no. He said, you have a hedge up around him. You have a wall up around him. But if you take it down, if you lower it, I'll get him to curse you. You realize Satan didn't refute anything. He just said you have a wall. So the only reason he knows there's a wall, there's a hedge up around is because he's tried him before. Now, he didn't want to say, yes, I've tried him and I failed. Because that's what walls will do. Some walls will definitely stay up and make you fail. Some walls are meant to come down. But some walls are meant to stay up as a protection, as a protective anointing for you and I that God has placed around us. I pray that you have that protection up around you. So let me ask you this question. What's behind your walls? I mean, be honest with me. We all have experiences with putting them up. Being sheltered in has taught us that it's okay to have some boundaries. It's okay to have some walls. And that's what it's taught us. But what walls are you either pulling down or are you putting up? I mean, who are you trying to wall out of your life? Is it an ex-lover? Is it a wayward child? I mean, who are you trying to keep out? Watch this. Is it Christian folks? I mean, let's be real here. Or are you trying to keep out the men of God? Or are you trying to keep out those who are trying to witness to you? Do you have walls up that you're trying to keep out the devil? Or do you have walls where you're trying to stay in your own little world because you feel that if you just stay right here, nothing can harm you, nothing can hurt you? Who's made you wall yourself off? I mean, who hurts you? Yes, who hurts you? Who broke your heart? And you put a wall up and you won't let anyone in. I mean, who did that to you? Who did you allow to come in that you put up such a thick wall that nobody can get through to you? And you just make the statement, well, whatever. I mean, I'm just going to be this way. That's a wall. We all need to be converted. We all need to be changing. We all need to be improving. We all need to be growing. But if you put up a wall, there's no growth. You're just stuck in time. You're like in a time warp. You're just stuck. because you refuse to move because somebody hurt you, and they hurt you pretty bad. And I get it. I mean, sometimes life throws us a curveball. Sometimes it throws a fastball, and we just can't catch it. We can't hit it. We can't see it coming, and it hurts so bad. But that's a wall that you need to bring down, because it's okay to be vulnerable. But when you put up a wall that no one can get in, wow, Satan has you trapped. Yes. God doesn't want a wall up. That's what he's telling Joshua. We're going to go over and we're going to take this wall down in Jericho. You wonder, well, hold on. Why are you messing with Jericho? Isn't it something that really, this is not the big fight for Israel. Now, they're going to fight in this promised land. It's not going to be just given to them. Oh, no. They've got some Hittites and some Amorites and some Jebusites. I mean, they got all kind of ites and bites in the promised land that they have to fight. Jericho is just a place to cut their teeth on. Do you realize that? That's what Jericho is. Jericho is just a place to get started. It's the Lord getting them ready for the battle to come. This is just teething fighting. Walk around Jericho 6 times, 1 time each day, and then walk around 7 times on the 7th day. That's what God is asking them to do. See, God is getting them battle tested. The battle is not yours, it's the Lord. That's what he's teaching them. Israel was told to walk around Jericho 1 time each day for 6 days. And then on the 7th day, walk around it 7 times and let the priests walk with them, and the priests will blow the trumpet. And when the priests blow the trumpet, the walls would come falling down. The walls of slavery came falling down after 430 years of Israel being enslaved. The walls of injustice are coming down every day. The walls of poverty. You know, you would think that by now we live in a time where there would be no poverty, but the walls of poverty have been established, and no matter how much we pour into it, no matter how much we try to eradicate it, it just never goes away. The walls of drug abuse, no matter what we do, we can't seem to win in that area. The walls of homicide and murder, the walls of innocent people being killed, no matter what we do, there are just certain walls that remain. And it seems like they're getting wider. The Bible tells us that hell is enlarging itself. And it's like, what kind of place is that? That's enlarging itself. The walls are increasing, because if it's enlarging itself, that means more people are planning to go there. I pray that we get out of our own ways. I pray that we follow the children of Israel as they're going to battle against those in the land that God has given them, the promised land. I pray that we know that we have a land of milk and honey right here on earth if we just would receive it. But you can't receive it if you don't believe it. Think about this for a moment. You get a job. Israel has a job to go into the promised land. You get a job, though, and you're hired by this company. And when you come into this company, the first thing they give you is a employee handbook. You get all the administrative policies and guidelines. You get the technology, if you will, cyber security rules. You get the company ethics rules. And then if you're Israel, you get the handbook, which is the 10 Commandments. You get a chance to read the book of Moses. It's because when you look at the Bible, you see from Exodus to Leviticus to Numbers to Deuteronomy, those are all books. Those are what I call the company orientation manual. And until you get to the bush of Joshua, they're not entering the promised land. They're just getting ready. They're getting battle tested. But while they're going through the book of Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy, they are learning about the tabernacle. They're learning about the offerings and the altar and the garments and the sacrifice. They're learning about prayer time. They're learning about rules of engagement. They're learning the little things that's so important to God. The little things that fester into big things if there are no walls. I was looking at Instagram the other day, and I was telling my wife that I realized that if you look at Instagram long enough, things will pop up that you don't really plan to look at, you don't plan to see. But if you're not careful, you'll start looking at things and you'll start peeking at things. You know how we make this big, bold statement that I will never mess off, I will never commit adultery, I will never lust after someone, I will never steal, I'll never kill anyone. But then you find yourself one day, and you're not intentionally trying to see anything, but somehow something pops up on your screen, and you look at it because you're curious, because it's there. And you realize how disgusting it is, and how disgusting that someone would even put that up on social media. But you're curious. And so here's how the devil used you. Here's how he uses Israel to murmur and complain that forfeit their opportunity into the promised land. They were so curious about what was happening back in Egypt, what was really going on, because it might be better back there than what it is out here. And so they were so curious, they kept complaining about it. You're curious, and so you will look at it, and you'll tell yourself, that's disgusting, I'm not going to look at that again. And then you'll find yourself, maybe months later, you'll look at it again. And it's like you'll repent, and you'll ask for forgiveness, and then maybe 6 months later, you'll look at it again. You see, curiosity, it said, kills the cat. But you'll look at it from time to time, and all Satan is looking for is just a little peak, if you will, just a little portal, just a little hole in your armor. He's looking for just a little weight that he can, just a little sense where he can sneak in, where he can pollute you. And so he'll take little by little. He doesn't mind. He's not anxious for nothing. No, not Satan. You see, Satan will weave his web little by little. He takes his time. He's in no hurry with you. No. He knows he's got to take his time with you. So he's going to give you just a little view of something, just a little view. Just to pique your curiosity. And you'll come back in about 6 months, and you'll look again, and you'll say how disgusting, and you'll repent again, you'll ask for forgiveness again, and then you'll look again, and you'll keep on that same trend. David looked at Bathsheba. He looked again. He looked. If the walls could talk. David looked over Bathsheba. And then he looked again, and then he had his way with her. And then he looked again when he had her husband killed. See, he's looking again. And then he looked again when they had a baby. He looked again. See, he kept looking. He kept going further and further. And that's what you and I do. We keep going further and further. You said not again, and then you looked again. You said not again. You said, I would never get in his bed, and you find yourself in his bed. And you go back and you repent, and you ask for forgiveness, and you say, I won't do it again, and you find yourself back in his bed again. You said you wouldn't cuss. But every time you pick up the phone, your friends, your family, your sisters, your brothers, your in-laws, they're always cussing. And so you find yourself cussing again. And you said you wouldn't do it again, but you find yourself cussing again and again. You see, I told you evil communication corrupts good manners. You keep finding yourself being confined inside of these walls, and you think it's safe, but it's never safe. No, you might be saved, but it's never safe. Satan is always tempting you. He's always trying you. In Joshua chapter 6, verse 10 and 11, it reads like this. And Joshua had commanded the people, saying, Ye shall not shout, watch this, nor make any sound, any noise with your voice, neither shall any word proceed out of your mouth, until the day I bid you shout. Then shall you shout. Watch this, verse 11. So the ark of the Lord compassed the city, going about it once, and they came into the camp and lodged in the camp. Who do you know? What army do you know is going to walk around a city every day? Now, this is the whole army, walking around the city once every day for 6 days and not say one word. You see, that's not you, because you can't resist the temptation of talking about what's on the other side of the wall. You can't resist the temptation of, how crazy is this walking around this wall every day for 6 days, and then on the 7th day for 7 days. See, you can't keep your mouth closed. You should have walled off your mouth a long time ago. You spoke on this thing so much that you don't believe. You spoke on this thing so much, but guess what? The enemy has figured you out. Watch this. You speak so much negative things about your grandchildren. You have spoken so many negative things about your children. Statements like, if this little nappy-head girl don't get somewhere and sit down. Now, she's listening to you. And years later, you're trying to figure out, why isn't she speaking to you? Why does she treat you this way? It's because she put up a wall. Because she got tired of being insulted by you. She got tired of being verbally abused by you. And you don't see it because you granny or you mama or you daddy. And you feel like you have the right to talk the way you want to talk. Well, you don't have the right to abuse a kid verbally. You don't. You say, oh, she's just too sensitive. No. No, she's sensitive enough to put up a wall. And you're trying to figure out how can you get across that wall. Your mouth has gotten you in trouble most of your life. Joshua said, don't say a word, because your mouths will get you in trouble. Your mouths got your fathers and your grandfathers in trouble to where they forfeit the promise into the promised land. They can't even get over here because they murmured and complained so much. Have you ever thought about walling off your mouth? Walling off your vocal cords? I mean, just closing it all up. Have you ever been quiet for a day? Have you ever just shut up? I mean the word shut up. Walled yourself up and just let God speak to you. Have you ever just cut yourself off from society and said, Lord, I'm all yours today? We don't want those kind of walls. No. We want the walls where we are big ballers and shot callers and we verbally say what we want to without a filter. Joshua says, shut it all up. We're going to walk around this city and we're going to shut it all up because we're going to shut it all down. If walls could talk. Joshua said, I don't want anything getting out. I don't want the enemy knowing. I want to make them so afraid of us. Because if we're quiet, that will really shake them up. We got them already on the run because we have God on our side, and they know it. Rahab said, they are melting. Their hearts are melting. They're so fearful of you. Joshua said, shut it up. I've heard enough. I've watched my fathers and my grandfathers and my grandmothers talk so much before us, and they forfeit their opportunity. Joshua said, shut up. Has anybody ever told you to shut up? Have you ever told yourself to shut up? I'm telling you right now, you might want to tell yourself to shut up. Joshua chapter 6, verse 20. So the people shouted when the priest blew the trumpets. And it came to pass when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, and the people shouted with a great shout, that the wall fell down flat, so that the people went up into the city, every man straight before him, and they took the city. I told you, Jericho was just cutting their teeth. That's all Israel was doing. That's all God was doing, was having them cut their teeth on the wall. But it just wasn't about Jericho. It was about personal walls that he was having them to cut out, to conquer. Yes, to detach themselves from all the stuff that happened in Egypt and that they've heard from their fathers and mothers. You can't just bypass Jericho. That's what some of you are doing. You just can't ignore Jericho. That's what some of you are doing. Jericho is what I would call unresolved issues if you don't take care of the business at hand. Some of you have bypassed your issues. You've tried to ignore them. And that's why all hell is breaking loose in your family. You have to take care of Jericho. Before you can get to the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites and the Hivites and the Jebusites and the gigabytes and the megabytes and the terabytes, I'm just saying, before you get all those bytes, you got to take care of the Jerichos in your life. Jericho is always located in a low place in the valley. It's always a low place because it's not the big thing. It's not the pinnacle of your task. It's a little mission. It's never the pinnacle of what God wants you to accomplish. But it's always something to cut your teeth on. Don't bypass small things. Your biggest blessings are around the corner from the biggest battles in your life. I pray that you deal with Jericho. I pray that you don't overlook it. I pray that you don't go past it. I pray that you realize that on your way to the land flowing with milk and honey, you're going to have to deal with the Jerichos in your life. If that's family, friends, a job, marriage, whatever it is, you've got to cut your teeth on Jericho. Don't forget Romans 10 and 9. Confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God has raised him from the dead, and you too shall be saved. If walls could talk.